On June 24, 1982, British Airways Flight 009 was operating a scheduled service from London Heathrow to Auckland, with planned stops in Bombay, Kuala Lumpur, Perth, and Melbourne. That evening's leg had departed Kuala Lumpur, and a Boeing 747-236B, registered GBDXH and named City of Edinburgh, was cruising at about 37,000 feet with 248 passengers and 15 crew on board. It was night over Indonesia, the kind of darkness where the ocean and the clouds blend into the same black surface, and the flight deck expects routine: fuel checks, position reports, and the slow rhythm of long-haul time. The first warnings did not arrive as sirens. They arrived as details that felt slightly wrong: a faint haze outside the cockpit windows as if the stars had been smudged, a dry, dusty smell, then an unmistakable hint of sulfur. An eerie glow danced across the windscreen and around the engines, like silent electricity crawling over metal. In the cabin, some passengers could see the engines shining an unusual blue, with light flickering forward through the fan blades in a stroboscopic pulse. At first it was confusing rather than terrifying, because nothing looked like a thunderstorm, and the weather radar offered no obvious warning. Then the instruments stopped being subtle. At roughly 1342 UTC, engine number 4 surged and flamed out. Less than a minute later, engine 2 followed. Seconds after that, engines 1 and 3 quit, almost together. In under a minute, the airplane went from 4 steady engines to none. The crew declared an emergency, turned toward Jakarta, and began the only calculation that mattered: how long the sky would last. The reason was volcanic ash from the eruption of Mount Galunggung, about 110 miles southeast of Jakarta. Ash clouds are a special kind of trap. At night, they can look like harmless haze, and because they are dry, they may not appear clearly on weather radar that is designed to detect moisture, not dust. And this dust is not soft. It is microscopic shards of rock and glass. Those particles scour surfaces like sandpaper, which is why windscreens can become opaque and landing lights can be stripped dull. Inside an engine, the problem becomes worse, because turbine temperatures can melt the glass component of ash. That molten material can coat turbine and nozzle surfaces, choking the airflow path and upsetting the pressure balance the compressor needs to stay stable. The result is surging, compressor stall, and finally flameout, because the engine can no longer sustain clean combustion. To the crew, it can look like a cascading systems failure, but the aircraft is simply being fed something it was never meant to ingest. With all 4 engines out, the 747 became a glider. A heavy one, but still a glider, and that is both reassuring and cruel. It reassures you because the airplane remains controllable, and it is built with enough inherent stability to keep flying if you fly it correctly. It is cruel because every second is an exchange you cannot renegotiate: altitude for time, time for options. The crew estimated they had roughly 20 minutes of glide and around 90 nautical miles of range from their cruise altitude, assuming they held the right speed and avoided wasting energy. Restart drills began immediately, even though they were well above the normal recommended altitude for in-flight engine starts, because the alternative was to do nothing and wait for the ground. Without engine bleed air, cabin pressurization degraded, oxygen masks deployed, and the cockpit crew went on oxygen as the aircraft descended toward an altitude where breathing would be possible again. Meanwhile, they navigated toward Jakarta, keeping one eye on instrument procedures and another on geography, because the wrong descent path at night over unfamiliar terrain is how emergencies turn into impact. For several minutes, the restart attempts failed. The engines would not relight while the aircraft was still high and still in the thick of the ash. The crew continued the descent, not as a panic dive, but as a controlled move into denser, cooler air where restart conditions improve and ash concentration can drop. As the 747 slipped out of the worst of the cloud, the world changed. The haze thinned, the acrid smell eased, and engine number 4 finally relit at around 13,500 feet, giving the crew just enough thrust to reduce the descent rate and buy time. Shortly after, engine 3 restarted. Then engines 1 and 2 came back as well, and for a moment, it looked like the nightmare had ended. It had not. When the aircraft encountered ash again, the eerie electrical glow returned. Engine 2 surged violently, and the crew shut it down to protect the aircraft, committing themselves to a 3-engine landing in a damaged airplane with a windscreen that had been effectively sandblasted. The approach into Jakarta's Halim Perdanakusuma Airport was flown largely on instruments, because looking through the windscreen was like looking through frosted glass. The crew relied on radio guidance, disciplined altitude control, and procedure, not sight. The 747 touched down safely, and everyone on board survived. On the ground, the aircraft's condition made the cause undeniable. Multiple engines needed replacement, the windscreen had to be changed, and ash contamination was found where it had no business being. More importantly, Flight 009 helped force aviation to treat volcanic ash as a trackable, avoidable hazard, not a rare curiosity, leading to better monitoring, advisories, and route planning. The lasting lesson is simple and uncomfortable. A modern airliner can lose all its engines without warning if it flies into the wrong invisible sky, and survival depends on disciplined flying, correct priorities, and a system that learns fast enough to keep the next crew out of the same cloud. If you enjoyed this story, subscribe for more aviation investigations, leave a like, and comment which flight I should cover next. Thanks for watching.